Hello there, my little cosmic mustard seeds. How are you doing? Thank you so much for coming to my channel to watch this video all about some of the sillier parts and the more annoying parts of what it is like to have a witchy practice and what it is like to identify as a witch. This is kind of somewhat of a follow-up to the 10 witchy things I don't do video. I really enjoyed that one, and I really enjoyed getting your feedback in the comments, learning what kinds of witchy things you don't do on your path, what kinds of things you got put off doing over time or you were just never into. That was really intriguing for me. So hopefully I will also get some good comments and feedback underneath this one, because I want to know what grinds your witchy gears. I want you to tell me what really gets right up your jumper. Tell me what annoys you. And I will tell you what annoys me. But before I do, I want to let you know that again today, this video is sponsored by Skillshare, which I'm extremely grateful for. Skillshare is an amazing online learning platform. I know plenty of you already know what Skillshare is all about because it has an incredible reputation for being an amazing platform where you can go on there and you can have a look for classes on all kinds of different things. And those classes are provided to you in a really awesome way, very clear. You've got sort of different modules to the class or different sections of each class so that you go through and you know exactly what you're going to learn, and you really can take in a lot of awesome information on various different things you might want to learn about. So I use my Skillshare account for various different kinds of things. I use it for looking up lessons about spiritual stuff, lessons about witchy and tarot stuff, but I also like to use Skillshare to learn about business, things like productivity, efficiency, marketing, branding, that kind of thing. That is really my jam. One of the classes I enjoyed recently actually was Productivity for Creatives by Thomas Frank. One of the main things I liked about this particular course in terms of my business and my creative endeavors is that it looks at the idea that inspiration is a muscle rather than being a muse. So instead of believing that you've got to wait around for inspiration to turn up and that you can't really do anything with your business or your creative endeavors until the inspiration turns up, Thomas Frank talks about how inspiration is a muscle. You've got to use it, you've got to exercise it, you've got to believe that you are the one that owns it and has control of it. And then he talks about different things that up your degree of efficiency. This is all really good stuff for me with my ongoing business endeavors, with running my online store, and with bringing consistent video content to you guys here on YouTube. So I really enjoy learning about those kinds of things. So I would definitely recommend that class to you. Skillshare is very affordable, my loves. It's under $10 a month. And if you want to get yourself a free trial, you can click the link down below. Darlings, I really want to apologize for the extra background noise that you're hearing today. Some of it is the road outside because we're just coming into rush hour right now, as rush hour as you can be in the lockdown in the UK. But a lot of it is the gale force wind that is coming down my road, and there's really not that much I can do about that. It sounds worse in the bedroom, so I'm just going to stay where I am. So hopefully that will not detract too much from what is going to be going on today, what I'm going to be talking about. Okay, so let's get down to the annoying stuff. The first thing I'm going to say that can be annoying when you're a witch is something that is not really annoying for me anymore because it's kind of been taken out of the equation. And as soon as I say it, I know people are going to think that can't be annoying for you because it doesn't make sense. But it used to be annoying for me. It used to be something that I struggled with. And that was knowing how out of the broom closet I wanted to be to different people in different scenarios, knowing what I might want to say at certain times or what I might want to post in certain places. And it was always a weird sort of dance I did with myself in my brain about what would be helpful or what would be acceptable and what would actually end up turning into an awkward discussion, or maybe somebody would end up knowing something that I didn't quite want them to know, because I have not always been this ridiculously out and proud witch with an incredibly public platform where you can Google me and straight away within 2.5 seconds of Googling me, you know exactly what my spiritual orientation is. It wasn't always that way. Now, was I always really paranoid about who knew? Did I have to hide it because I was living deep in the middle of the Bible Belt in a very conservative town that was very unaccepting of my beliefs? No, that definitely is not my story, and I'm really, really fortunate for that. I'm very lucky for that. But there were definitely situations, for example, with work, for example, with different sets of friends, some of whom I was much closer to and some of whom I wasn't as close to, and those friends overlapping and having certain conversations where some of my friends would know I was a witch, and then other people, I wouldn't even barely know them, and I probably didn't want them to know I was a witch in case they took it the wrong way or they have weird feelings about it. And then I feel like they've got this sort of extra area of judgment around me that I wouldn't want them to have. So I had things like that going on. And I would also have certain situations where I wouldn't know what was appropriate to post and where I would want to post it. I know a lot of witches have this. In fact, a lot of witches have sort of a different account, don't they? They have their ordinary Instagram account, Facebook account, Twitter, but then they also have their witchy, their spiritual, their more out and proud account where they post things that are not suitable perhaps for consumption by their in-laws or their work colleagues or whoever, people they go to their, I don't know, sewing classes with or whatever, or maybe even a sibling that is very judgmental. But that can be an annoyance because sometimes you might really want to post something about Samhain and a lot of your friends would be very happy to support that and to be like, oh, that's interesting, or yeah, blessed Samhain or whatever. And it's this nice feeling that your friends or your work colleagues are supportive, but then you might have a few people in there on the friends list that are not supportive and might post something embarrassing or unnecessary, like, you know, you should read the Bible, or, you know, you shouldn't be into witchcraft. So you can basically end up with these overlapping groups of people, some of whom are supportive or some of whom you're open with, and then some of whom you're not at all open with, you don't want them to know, or you're not sure if you want them to know. That can be annoying AF, definitely. Now, as I said, for me now, that feels like a very distant memory because I am so out that no one can ever put me back in. I'm as out as you can be. In fact, sometimes it's sobering to think how out I am as a witch and as a tarot reader and everything else. There's really no way of hiding it because this is my legal name. So when you Google me, you're Googling me, and that's it. And there was this weird time at the beginning of my public life as a witch where I realised that there were going to be people finding out from what they were seeing online. So, you know, there were going to be people who, there have been people in my life who did not know previously and then ended up finding out because they typed my name into Facebook to add me as a friend on Facebook, and they saw my public page first, my kind of business page, if you want to call it that. And they were like, oh, what the hell is this whole thing that Kellyanne is doing? So I know there have been people that have found out that way. And through other things as well. There's been a few people that have found out through Googling something, through putting something into YouTube and me coming up, and they've messaged me on Facebook and said, oh my God, you've got a whole business about spiritual stuff. So yeah, it's more of a long distant memory for me now, chickens, but I wanted to put it in as an annoyance because I know that there are going to be lots of witches watching who find this to be a source of irritation, a source of annoyance, a source of confusion. And I suppose I wanted to give you guys the opportunity in the comments to let us know, do you find that you have to have a separate platform where you can talk about witchy things because you really want to, but you don't necessarily want certain people in your life knowing? Have you had situations where you've been having a conversation and somebody has mentioned something about your witchcraft, but it's in front of somebody whom you don't really want them to know, and you're kind of going, yeah, no, don't talk about it. Yeah, there's situations like that come up, right, where you're not on the same page with everybody in the room and you don't really want the black cat to be let out of the bag, if you know what I mean. So I would love to know down below if you're having issues with that currently, or what kinds of solutions you found to make that into less of an annoyance for you. The second of the 10 things that can be annoying for witches. This is also something that I will have to say I do not experience anymore, but I also never really experienced it very much at all. So I'm quite lucky in that way. I wanted to include it in the list because I know that, again, a lot of other witches do deal with these kinds of issues. So the second thing that can be annoying is when you are perpetually asked to do things that are a part of your witchhood as favours to people. So perpetually asked to do readings, perpetually asked to connect with somebody's deceased loved one, perpetually asked to do a cleansing or read the energy in a room or read the energy of a situation or do some kind of divination or whatever, spell work, you know, being asked, can you do a binding, can you do a hexing, can you do a whatever it is I need you to do, a love spell. And I suppose adjacent to that is being asked to teach things a lot. Being just perpetually asked by people that are right at the beginning, can you explain this? Can you explain the elements and how they work? Can you explain about sacred space? Can you explain how I do a spell and how I make it work and that kind of stuff? Now, of course, there is a lot of very giving, very compassionate, free mentorship in the witchcraft world. There are so many different places that you can find witches who are up for the task of mentoring and sharing their knowledge with those who are much newer on the path. And I think that's amazing. But I think that's got to be something that is consensual and that the mentor has agreed to. rather than being a case of, you know, you're a witch, so anyone who has a witchy question or a favor to ask of somebody who is a witch will come to your door, and it comes to be a chore, it comes to be a burden, and it comes to be a situation where witches are often not really considered to be people that have rather a full plate of things themselves to do. It's almost like if people know you're a witch, then they almost think it's open season to ask you anything and to ask you for anything. And I know that can be something that is an annoyance, but it's also something that's really good, isn't it? Because it encourages us to be more comfortable and more forthright with where our boundaries are, and to be able to say, you know, I don't actually give readings for free, you can book in with me, blah, blah, blah. Or I do actually do house cleansings or ritual, but I only do it once a month, or I only do it, you know, for this reason, or something like that, where you really have to vocalize what it is that you do and do not do. I've spoken to people over the course of time, quite a few witches, who have allowed themselves to be called upon for divination over and over again, or spell work over and over again, and they never really set the boundary. So it comes to a point where it's the breaking point, basically. It's the point where they really need to say, sorry, I really can't keep doing these readings, or I really can't keep doing this stuff, or I really can't keep giving this degree of direction to you for your witchy path. And it's been difficult for them because it's gone on for so long that they now find it very difficult to bite the bullet, because they've just been permitting people to come to them, and they've been giving readings, or they've been giving whatever lovely witchiness they've been giving. And so it's quite difficult to then say, I need to set a boundary. Sorry, this is too much. So I think the earlier you can nip that kind of thing in the bud, the better. And quite often people just do not really remind themselves that you are also a human being, and you also have stuff on your plate, and you're not just there to be the neighborhood witch every 5 minutes when someone has an issue or when somebody needs a question answered. So sometimes just a gentle reminder to those people will kind of make them wake up to what they're actually asking you for, and they'll be like, oh, hang on, sorry, yeah, that's actually something I can Google myself. Or sorry, yeah, I should offer you payment for this. Like, I shouldn't keep just kind of assuming that because you're a friend, because you're my sister, because whatever, you can do this for me. That's actually not fair. So sometimes it just takes for you to gently nudge somebody in the direction of reflecting upon what they're actually asking you for, and that might be too much. A good goddess on a blue banana with Baphomet on top. That is stunning. Damn. Well, I'll have to make myself another one of them. Number 3 of the 10 things that can be annoying as a witch is misinformation. Misinformation, doing the rounds over and over again, especially the kind of misinformation that creates harsh judgment where there doesn't need to be any. I know there's a lot of misinformation that does the rounds within the Christian community, within, like, you know, large areas of the Christian community, not everybody. And that can be really damaging for witches in the community. That can be really hard because Christians are learning things about witches that are simply not the case. They are full of misinformation about Wicca and about witchcraft more broadly. And that can be a real difficulty. And I'd love to know what kinds of things down in the comments you learned yourself while you were attending church that you later as a witch recognised were dead wrong and were definitely a source of really sort of malicious propaganda and misinformation designed to make people fear or dislike witches. The kind of misinformation that I tend to have more of a problem with, though, and I suppose it's because it's the kind of misinformation that I've felt more emotionally affected by since I wasn't raised Christian and I'm not sort of around that world, is misinformation that comes from witches themselves, that comes from very strongly proclaimed witches with a strong public platform, or any kind of public platform, I suppose. That tends to disappoint me more and irk me more. And as I said, it's probably because I've had exposure to it more as well, rather than the Christian sort of like witch hating stuff, which I don't come across much unless I look for it. Or when clients talk to me about how it's affected them, then it might really grate on me because I can see how damaging it's been for them, how difficult it's been for them. But for me, when I see witches saying things that are dead wrong, that is an issue. And it's usually when the kind of misinformation I don't like is when witches just paint things with a very, very broad, very dogmatic stroke. So for instance, you might see a witch in a video saying things like, witches don't work with the devil, witches don't believe in the devil. The devil is not a concept that witches actually work with or believe in, it's a Christian concept. And you kind of listen to it and you think, well, some witches do though work with the Christian devil, and some witches also work with Christ and the Blessed Holy Mother and the angels. So, it's just a very broad stroke. It seems like a handy and correct thing to say. Witches don't believe in the devil, so how can we work with the devil? But actually, it's more complicated than that, isn't it? And it's not actually true. Or you will see sort of a very moralistic broad stroke, like a witch saying, witches shouldn't curse and hex. Real witches don't perform curses. That is not what witches do. Now, I can understand that there's a lot of respectability politics in saying something like that, because it's almost a way of trying to correct misinformation that is put out there by Christians, who make out that, we do curse and we eat babies and all that jazz. that's hyperbole, darlings. But you know what I mean? It's an overcorrection. So it's not correct. Witches do curse and hex, and some witches definitely don't, myself included, but some witches certainly do, or certainly would. So it's again a broad stroke, and I can kind of understand that one, because it is trying to correct some of the misinformation that is put out by Christians, but it's an overcorrection, and it actually is not true, and it therefore becomes misinformation, which is not useful to witches who are new to the path. We don't want witches that are new to the path to be grossly misinformed about things like that. I think the really important thing for me is that witches are comfortable with staying in their lane when it comes to information or opinions or advice that they are putting out online. So I acknowledge, or I try as much as I possibly can to acknowledge all the things that I'm just not an expert on. I just don't know that much about those things. It's not my specific area of expertise. It's not something that I can speak to really strongly. And I try to sort of say that, when I'm conveying my own opinion on something, or I'm conveying something that I've read, something that I've heard, I will say at the same time, I'm not the expert in that. And sometimes I will even direct witches to the person who is the expert in that. I've often, had conversations with clients during my witchy brainstorming sessions and things like that, where I've said, that's an interesting rabbit hole you want to go down, and these are the things I can definitely speak to on that, but watch these channels, read these books. These people are really, they really are hot shit when it comes to that particular area. So I think it's all about recognizing that you can speak about what you've read, you can speak about the extent to which you know something, but you do not have to proclaim yourself an expert in that area. And if you know that there is somebody that seems to be much more learned and has a longer and more solid track record, don't be afraid to just direct people there. I think it's all about giving shine in witchcraft. It's all about saying, I don't know everything there is to know on that, but I can direct you to a witch with much more knowledge in that area. And remember in point 2 where I said that, sometimes it can be annoying for witches when people are picking their brain all of the time, and wanting answers to questions and stuff like that. I wanted to mention that when somebody refers you to a witch that has a lot of wisdom in a certain area, obviously don't be afraid to look through their resources first, buy their book, look at their website, look at the videos that they put out on something, instead of private messaging them a list of your questions, because that is time consuming for the witch involved, and it means that they are privately giving you their energy and time, as opposed to you taking of the energy and time that they've already put out publicly. So, definitely remember that whenever you are privately one-to-one asking to pick a witch's brain about specific things, first of all, you're asking for their time and energy that is just for you. Nobody else will get the benefit of that. So really, you're asking for their labor, you're asking for their effort, their time, their emotional input sometimes. And it's really important that you think carefully about whether or not you want to ask someone for that, especially someone you've never met before, you've never had a conversation with, you've never previously supported their work in any way. You have no prior relationship. So it's important to think about whether or not that's appropriate, because that can be kind of annoying and it can be a drain. But also, is it appropriate to ask a list of your 5 questions that you want answered before watching any of the videos that have been thoughtfully put out by this witch? So if you're interested in Luciferianism, for example, and somebody refers you to a witchy channel where there is a lot of discussion and useful resources about Luciferianism, don't just say, here's the witch that can answer my questions, and go straight to her DMs or straight to her email and ask away. Don't do that. Go through the videos, pay attention to the resources that have already been put out. Sorry if that seemed like a little bit of a lecture, but it kind of relates a little bit to the second point of annoyance. where witches are asked to do things without much forethought for the amount of time they might have, or for the resources that they have indeed already put out that answer the questions that you are asking. So I thought I would mention that, okay? Just gently mention that. Okay, we're at the fourth thing that annoys me as a witch, or annoys witches in general, or can be annoying, can be irritating for witches. Why the hell is there not enough space for all the stuff that I want? Damn it. I just, you know what, I don't have much space. I never had much space growing up. We never had a big house, and I always shared with my sister. And then I had my own room for a little while when I was living at home, and I had more space, and it was very, very decadent. But then the first time I moved out with a partner, I remember having so little space. We were in a tiny little studio flat, and it was every little scrap of space that I had was so valued and so valuable. And on average, we have smaller places in the UK anyway, guys, than you do over in America. I actually looked at the average square feet for domestic spaces across, I think it was like Japan, and then Scandinavia and the UK and America. And like, you know, there's just bigger houses in general in America. Even if you have a small space, it's going to be much bigger on average than a space in the UK. We're like sardines over here on this little island. So yeah, why isn't there enough space for me to have, damn it, a dedicated altar for the Blessed Holy Mother, a dedicated altar for the Dark Mother? Hell, I want a dedicated altar I want a far out ridiculous altar that makes absolutely zero sense and is almost paradigm bending just by virtue of me sitting at it and looking at all the mad crap on it. I want shrines everywhere. I want shrines all over every wall. I mean, wall space makes it so that it's a bit better, but when you want to be able to sit down and actually actively do things at the space or interact, you need the floor space, don't you? So I think a lot of witches make do by having little shrines on their walls and things. And my nana was devoutly Catholic. I know a lot of you know about the Catholic connection for me, and it's a big one. You know, it's close to my heart. My nana used to have pictures of saints on the walls, but also those kind of, you know, wall altar shrines with with Mother Mary in there, or Saint Francis of Assisi, or Jesus. So from an early age, I recognised that you don't just have to have altar spaces that you can sit down at. You can also have your shrines on the walls and bits and pieces, which is a good space saver. But I think that, for, you know, really, I would like to have the space to have a permanent sacred space. The dream is to have so much floor space that you would literally have permanent, like a crystal encrusted sacred space. I don't know, like the fantasies that I have about having just a gigantic amount of space. I mean, I've had fantasies in the past about having a grove in the back garden, having a back garden for a kickoff, having a grove of trees. I think we just want, we want everybody to stand well the fuck back while we do our witchy stuff, like, and it just takes up all the space in the world. But that is, of course, why mind altars are so important and such a decadence for me. A lot of the things that I can't do in life, I can do in the realm of the imagination, and the imaginative faculty gives me all I need to have the altars that are not possible in life. But yeah, just having the space, you know, and I have leveled up so much on my witchy journey in that regard. I'm so lucky. I have an alcove in my current apartment where it's so lovely that I can actually, my altar fits perfectly in there. I purposefully purchased a secondhand set of drawers that fit right in that alcove, and I feel like I have such a much more decadent space than I did throughout my whole 20s. And certainly anything that I could have in my teens wasn't there, because I wasn't out and I shared a room with my sister, and it just all would have been weird and not acceptable. Not acceptable in a sort of a sense that my mum didn't like it or whatever, but it was just, I was a teenager, you know, I wasn't ready to be open about what I was doing, and I wouldn't have had the time alone in the room to do that anyway. So it was only when I got to my mid-20s that I started thinking, do I want an actual space? Because I could have an actual space, you know, I could have a place for an altar. And then by the time I knew I was a witch, because I threw the word off and on again a few times, and I'll leave a video down below that kind of explains about my journey of owning the word witch for myself. I talk about throwing it on and putting it on again, throwing it off again, sort of thing. And I think by my mid-20s, when I decided, well, it's kind of moving into my late 20s, yeah, it was like the age of 26, 27, when I thought, no, I really want an altar, like a full-time, this is my altar all the time. And it's not just a thing that's sort of a space that is a meditation space. Because I would have spaces beforehand, but they would be like a bunch of flowers and, you know, some rocks and shells that I'd found, things like that, maybe some crunchy leaves. But it was always something that if somebody came in, it wouldn't immediately be identifiable as some full-on witchy skullduggery is going down here. I mean, serious occult tomfoolery is happening. Nobody would know that from looking at it. So it was almost like a neutral and safe meditation / reflection area. And it was only at that point in my early late 20s where I thought, no, I think I want to go full. I want to go full on. I want to go all out. And at that point, my altar space was literally, I'm looking over actually at the original altar table that I used. I'm going to go get it. Hang on one second. Cut away. Cut away, cut away. This is it, darlings. My very first little altar space that I had in my room. It is a nesting table that I got from my mum's. My mum said I could have it because it wasn't getting much use at hers. It's light, it's tiny, and it was the very first space I had, and that was all the room that I had in my bedroom. And it was a shared house, so there was no other space for it to be. It was a small room in a shared house that I shared with my boyfriend and all of his music stuff and everything. So there was a tiny little space in one corner that was where I could have an altar. So that's how I started off. So considering the altar that I have now, and if you haven't seen it, I will leave an altar tour down below for you so you can see it, and you can see it over on Instagram as well. I know many people have seen my altar set up on Instagram. I have come a long way, so I can't really complain. But would I have 5 more like the one I have with other things on? Yes, I would. Yes, I would. I want all the space. There's never going to be enough space, damn it. Number 5, annoying thing. Annoying. Having workmen into your house. Who the fuck is with me? Having workmen into your house is so frustrating when you are busy doing things, when you have an altar, when you have 2 altars, when you have, you know, altars that you do things at. You've got spellcraft on the go. You've literally got cards laid out. You've got offerings of incense and flowers that you make to your gods and everything. You know, things look pretty damn witchy in your space. And it's really hard for me because, first of all, I need to know where the workmen are going to be and what they're going to be doing. So do I need to move things out of the way in advance so that I'm not caught unawares when the workmen come in? Now, I know there are going to be some of you here that are going to think, well, just let the workmen in. I mean, who cares if you have 3 altar spaces with things going on and cards and crystals, and who cares what they think? Which is a fair point. Who does care what they think? But number 1, I get very sensitive to the energy change that occurs when somebody comes into my space who doesn't know me, doesn't know or potentially respect my practice, and is around my witchy shizzle. I have to do things afterwards. It just makes things a little bit out of whack, and I have to do energy clearing and cleansing, and it's just, it's an extra thing. It's an extra thing that I have to put into the witchy routine that is irritating and is just extra energy for me. So that's one thing. Second of all, it's annoying when you have to move witchy stuff out of the way for a workman to get where they want to be. I had a leaky window frame for ages in the wintertime that I would not get fixed because it would mean taking down my entire main altar for the workman to be able to get to the window, which is directly behind it. There's no way around it. I would have literally had to take apart the entire altar space for the workman to effectively stand on the set of drawers that I use for my altar. I know. It's black. It's absolutely sacrilegious. As sacrilegious almost as witchcraft itself. But yeah, I was like, oh, do you know what? That window can leak. I'm just going to put a towel on the mantel shelf underneath, because the idea of deconstructing my entire main witchy space was just, there was never a good time for that. There was never a convenient time for that. I've had another time where a workman came in and he needed to go under the sink, but then he told me he needed to get into the boiler room cupboard, which was unexpected. And there was something going on in front of the boiler room cupboard that had witchy significance and needed to be out for the entire lunar cycle. And I had to tell him, you've got to go away and come back another day. And he was like, are you serious? I can't just look at it right now. You can't just move whatever's in front of it. And I was like, no, I'm really sorry. And he was like, do you need help like lifting things? And I was like, no, you just can't get in there right now. So annoying. Like, stop it. Just let me be a witch in peace. I'm sure that when people are full on renovating their house, when they've got loads of works going on, that must be really frustrating, because maybe for large for large stretches of time, you can't have your altar space. Things are not normal in your home. There are people in your home. The energies are weird. They need to get where your witchy things would normally be. So, you know, I can't complain. I definitely haven't gone through a full-on house renovation or anything of that nature where you're sort of really itching to get your things back out and have everything normal, but you are in an ongoing state of people coming in and out the door with stuff. So yeah, I have had the experience that some of us here know about, I know, Floodgate 2015, where a massive leak was happening above the ceiling of my spare room where I was living. And yeah, the ceiling collapsed and water went everywhere, and about 6 of my tarot decks were completely destroyed. I'm talking they were together in a messy, watery clump, guys. You could cut it like cake. Seriously, it was traumatic. Okay, Floodgate 2015, nightmare. And can I just say that every one of the decks I lost was very lovingly replaced by members of my audience who sent me those decks again. My Nicoletta Ciccoli, someone sent it to me again. My Bohemian Gothic, somebody sent it to me again. It was amazing. I didn't ask, it just happened. And that still lives right there in the center of my heart. That was amazing, because to come home and find decks destroyed, that wasn't very nice. That was very annoying. Oh dear. I mean, the workmen coming in afterwards and having to deal with the leak, that's whatever, because at this point, you know what, I've lost the decks. I mean, just do what the fuck you want. Fine, let me just move everything out the way. Now let's get into the Sabbats and Esbats, especially the Sabbats, and any other significant times during your particular witchy year that you like to recognise, and the guilt of not recognising them, or the sense of irritation that you may have that you were looking forward to doing something to recognise them and to work with the energies, and then things came up and you couldn't quite do it. That is definitely something that is a source of irritation to me, for definite. You know, just having an important Sabbat clashing with an important birthday or an important other kind of event for a loved one is difficult. Having Samhain clashing with a really righteous Halloween party is kind of annoying, although I've always managed to make it work. I've always managed to somehow make everything work so I can do awesome Halloween stuff, and I can also do as much Samhain stuff as it's important for me to do, because Samhain is a big one for me, as I know it is for most witches I know. So that's kind of worked out okay, but there have been a few times, especially where it's been a Sabbath and a significant lunar situation is happening, and there's something else in the calendar, and it's like, oh, why can't I just run 2 completely separate timelines consecutively? I think sometimes the guilt of not practicing enough is a big source of irritation for a lot of witches as well. I think sometimes witches put a lot of pressure on themselves to be very consistent and always very dedicated, and I think that if you recognise points on the wheel of the year, if you recognize Esbats, the moon phases, and what they mean, if you have other things that you recognize like feast days or specific things that you do that are sort of connected to your culture or your specific witchy tradition, then the feeling that you are not in a good way mental health wise to practice, physical health wise to practice, you've got other things that are demanding your attention, you have young children, and so it's not always going to work out for you to do what you need to do at the time and date you're supposed to do it. I think that creates guilt, and that is an issue for witches. And I want to direct you down below to a Q&A that I did about witchy problems, troubleshooting witchy problems, because there were quite a few witches in that particular Q&A who were asking me about, you know, feeling that they are not practicing as efficiently as they should be. They're not doing enough. They're not real witches. They are not feeling that they are able to take it seriously because of their other commitments in life. So if you're feeling that way, I do offer lots of loving advice in that video, so I'm going to leave that one down below for you. The 7th annoying thing for witches that I had to mention, how could you think I would not mention this? Of course I was always going to, and it is conversion attempts. Ah, the conversion attempts. I remember my first conversion attempt. Seriously, tell me about your first conversion attempt. I want to know. This is going to be different for different people watching this video. And that, I think, you know, that's something that I really need to state. Some people come from a very religious upbringing, a very religious background, and the conversion attempts basically never stopped for them, because from the moment that they said, look, I am not Christian, I don't believe these things, and I'm doing something different now, or even I don't want to attend church anymore, they will have had family members, loved ones trying to bring them back into the flock, trying to, you know, help them to understand that they are lost, they've gone wrong, and they need to come back to Christ. So for those people, it's going to be pretty relentless. It's also going to take a large emotional toll at times. And sometimes a lot of boundaries need to be put up around conversations like that because it just becomes too much. And I will say that I do not know what that is like. I've worked with a lot of clients that are dealing with those issues, but that was never the case for me. For me, the main way that I experience conversion attempts is online underneath my videos or in my social media posts. And fortunately for me, it doesn't happen as much as I've noticed it happens for some other witches in the community. I've noticed that I actually get a lot less of this, but it does happen, and I do immediately delete and block those accounts. One of the main things that annoys me though about the conversion attempts is that they're so naff. They're just really, I don't know, I just feel like if I was a die-hard Christian and I seriously believed that witches are lost and they're going to hell and they need my help to understand that they've got to accept Christ as their personal Lord and Saviour, the last thing that I would do if I had the opportunity to have even 1 second of that witch's time or access to that witch's audience would be to just post something from the Bible. That's just not convincing to someone who doesn't read the Bible, has no real interest in reading the Bible. In my case, has like never really accessed the whole Bible. I've read and studied parts of the Bible for my own interest, but I wasn't raised on it. You know, it's not something that's even going to grab my heartstrings as somebody who previously loved it, because I didn't previously love it. It's never been my sacred text. So it just seems really weird that if you've got the opportunity for me to read something that you're writing, and in your mind, you have the opportunity to save my soul by helping me to turn away from what I'm doing, why would you choose a Bible verse? There's not even any explanation around the Bible verse. You know, they don't even start out with a paragraph saying like this excerpt from the Bible means this, and it means that this is what witchcraft is really doing to you. And there's no explanation. It's just a Bible verse. That's never converted anyone. Just a singular Bible verse, just on its own, I'm sure, has never really converted anyone. I think that conversion attempts could be a lot more high caliber. That's what I will say. If I was going around the internet trying to convince witches to drop the tarot cards and get on board with God, I would for sure do something a lot more tantalizing. I'd bring a lot more charisma, a lot more passion. I'd be a lot more personable. The last thing I would do is just post a Bible quote. It just seems so... that's not gonna do anything. So I guess I find the laziness of conversion attempts kind of more irritating maybe than the conversion attempts themselves. It depends what kind of day I'm having. Sometimes I really don't like the conversion attempts full stop, and they're irritating as fuck. I mean, they're easily dealt with, but they're irritating. It's also particularly irritating when Christians come in and instead of just addressing me in the comments, they will try to interact with my audience members who are saying things, and they get the boot so quickly. I will not tolerate anyone trying to fuck with the energy that my audience members feel in my otherwise usually very safe and very productive and very lovely comment section. So that annoys me, and I do deal with that really swiftly. But a lot of the time when I see someone trying to convince me to get on the Christ gravy train, I think this isn't the way to do it. I don't even understand this Bible verse. It's something to do with lambs and blood, and it's just not really great. It's not switching me on, it's not plugging me in, it's not convincing me. You know, there could have just been something perhaps a little more high quality in this conversion attempt. That's my real irritation with it. Damn, that wind! It's going to take my whole house down. Blimey. It's ridiculous. Hopefully it'll take me to Munchkin Land, you know what I mean? And I can follow the yellow brick road. Anyway, so a little note on the conversion attempts. I think sometimes when people come along and they just flood my posts with Bible verses, and they will flood several of my videos, the same account will do several of my videos with the same Bible verse. So it's just copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. I think they're probably going through the motions just to feel good that they've done something. They don't really think there's any serious way that they're going to be converting anybody with just a Bible verse alone. So I do get it. I get that like the cut and paste Bible jobby is something that they do to sort of to convince themselves that they're doing the work they need to be doing, that they are, you know, helping people to get saved, but they don't really believe they're going to save a witch that's made 600 videos on the internet. So, you know, maybe that's it. Maybe that's why they don't put a little bit more pizzazz into it, you know, a little bit more zazazoo. But I would like to see that happening. That's all I'm saying. Okay, what's number 6? What did I write? Oh, okay. So with number 6, no, it's not number 6. It's number 8. I'm on number 8 now. Okay. So with number 8, I wrote being asked the same questions over and over again, especially questions that are based on misunderstandings. Now, again, this is going to depend on the kind of day I'm having. And I think for a lot of you witches out there, it's going to be the same. Sometimes you have a lot of patience for a question that you're asked that you've heard a lot before and is based on a misunderstanding. And sometimes you're going to give your sort of short and sweet, let's just get it done answer because you're at a party and you don't really want to talk about it at that moment. Or it's somebody that you feel isn't really open to the answer anyway, so there's like a bit of tension there, or you're just bored, you know, whatever. One question I've been asked a lot of times, which is based on a massive misunderstanding, and I don't know where people are getting the idea from that this is a legitimate and good question to ask, but I often get asked, are you a black witch or a white witch? You know, a lot of people that are not versed at all in the craft, they do not have any experience with the craft. They seem to have, in this country at least, I don't know where it is elsewhere, but they seem to have this idea that it is a reasonably clever question to ask that's going to make them seem informed in some way. If they say, oh, are you a white witch? And you know, I've had that a few times with people that I don't know that well, and we've gotten onto the subject. They've asked me, and I've said I'm actually a practicing witch, and they say, "Oh, a black witch or a white witch?" And you know, it's just a question that I've heard a lot. Of course, it's irritating because you know you're really only ever going to be answering the same thing, which is kind of like, well, it doesn't really work like that, blah, blah, blah. And you're just kind of going through the motions of answering. Do I sound like a real bitch when I'm saying this, guys? Or is anybody with me on this? That you have those certain questions that you just get asked a lot and there's the same stock answer and you start to feel a little bit like Google and, you know, you just keep giving the same answer. And it just gets dull, I suppose. Yeah, that's kind of an irritation. I think one question that people get asked that is based a lot on misinformation is, do you work with the devil? Can you talk to the devil? That's something I've been asked before. And as I mentioned earlier, like some witches do full on work with the devil, like fair play. I'm not saying I've not got anything against it. Got a lot of time for it. But, you know, it's something that's based on misinformation. It's basically like the only thing that somebody might be able to latch onto or that somebody instantly thinks of. So then they start asking you about it and it's like, oh, here we go again. Do I work with the devil? You know, those kinds of things. I think as well, sometimes people ask questions that they don't realize are such gigantic questions that sometimes can't even be answered with language. But even if they can be answered with language, you're going to need quite a bit of time and quite a bit of dedication and concentration to really get into that. You know, so quite a few times when people find out I'm a witch, they've asked, oh, right, okay, so what do you believe? What's it all about then? What do you believe is going on? And I'm like, oh shit, son, let me just go and get a tin opener from my drawer in the kitchen for this gigantic can of worms that you're suggesting we open here at this very house soiree. I mean, you know, that's just a huge question. And for some people, that seems like a good opener. That's a good opening question. What do you believe? And wow, I some days I can barely answer that myself. Here's the thing about it though that I will say is when you are, let's say you're falling in love with someone, you're in a relationship with someone, it's really going well and you're coming to learn more and more about each other, you sit up all night talking, you know, you go for long walks, you're really like connected to each other, you're talking. And when that person says to you, so let's get into it then, what do you believe? Like, why are you a witch? What is that all about? That is almost, you know, pointedly a beautiful thing to be able to answer because there's that investment. Or when a parent says, you know, I'm open to learning, what do you believe? Tell me about all this stuff. Again, it's beautiful if someone that's in your life that you are actively in those deep conversations with actually is ready to take on the sort of the nuts and bolts, the different components of your spirituality. That's wonderful. But when somebody that you barely know, somebody that you keep it cordial with, an acquaintance, somebody that you've only just met, somebody that you may never meet again, asks you, what do you believe in then? What is this whole thing? It's so much. It's like me meeting somebody at a party for the first time and saying, so tell me all about your childhood, your upbringing, the most difficult things that have ever happened and how you've tied that into your overall sense of who you are now and where you're going in life. It's like, come on, you just wouldn't. It's not an opening question. Occasionally as well, somebody does ask that with a certain tone. And I think a lot of witches watching know exactly what I mean by that certain tone. You know, that kind of firebrand, militant, religious atheist type of tone, where atheism has become their religion, and they ask you as if to be like, what's going on then here? Come on, tell me. And they're basically saying, you explain to me why I should think that anything you believe isn't bullshit. Like, give me what I need in order to be able to respect you from going forward. You explain to me why you believe this whole mess of crap, and then we'll see whether or not you're actually entitled to a baseline level of respect. So there's that tone. Now, I might sometimes be misreading that tone, and that's fine, that's fair enough. But I think I'm long in the tooth enough now to know what that tone is, and I really don't appreciate it when the question comes with a side helping of that tone. The only good thing about that tone and that vibe that you're getting, that someone's testing you or someone's sort of immediately judged you as a bit of a crackpot and a flibbity-gibbet, is that you can then troll them. You can troll them big time. You can be like, have you ever seen that cartoon, The Simpsons? Okay, well, The Simpsons is my personal pantheon. And I don't know, you can just take it as far as you want really at that point. They've asked for it, so give it to them. That's what I say. Number 9 is something that doesn't always annoy me. It just sometimes does. It's sometimes an irritation, or maybe even just more a point of sadness for me as a witch. And it is that I can't go into a temple that's dedicated to hell just on the fly and drop an offering there. I don't know, I just, I think I spoke about this in my video about working with 2 goddesses, which I will leave in the down bar for anyone who hasn't seen it. It is a really good watch if you are somebody who's thinking about working with personified deity, or if indeed you feel called to working with 2 deities, or you do work with 2 principal deities, because I do as well, and I talk about it a lot in that video. And in that video I said that one of the main differences between working with the Mother Mary and working with Hel, the Norse goddess, is that with Mary I can go into a Catholic church anytime I want, and there's a big statue of her, and there's probably also another statue of her, and you can light a candle and you can look up at the statue, and you know that everybody in there really feels a deep sense of respect, love towards this this figure of the divine feminine. I don't have the same with Hel, and it feels imbalanced, you know. I just wish I could have that sometimes. And I do imagine, like, you know, going to the Temple of Athena in ancient Greece, and it just gives me tingles and it excites me. And I just kind of wish sometimes that that was possible. But I mean, it's not something that is frequently an irritation. It's just sometimes a point of sadness that there isn't just more places. Even if it was Unitarian, but it was for pagans and witches all over. So, you know, with Unitarian, as far as I'm aware, it's this sense that everybody has a belief structure, but we don't all have to have the same one. We could worship different gods or whatever, but we just come together in worship, but we're not really focusing on a specific godhead. I would like to have places like that in every, at least, major city, but just for pagans and witches, so that you know when you go in there that you're all witches, you're all pagans, you know what I mean? But you might be different colours, different shapes of witch, but you're all witches. And within there, you've just got a certain amount of just witchy shit, and just, I don't know, there's sermons, but they're given by witches for witches about owning your personal power, about great spellcraft, about how you can be a witch and an activist, about like, I just love the idea that there'd be a witchy temple, and you could be like, oh, the sermon on Sunday was about, you know, working with personified deity, but seeing personified deity manifest within yourself, and about how we can see deity everywhere in the archetypes surrounding us in popular culture. It's like, oh, really? Oh, that sounds like a great sermon. Yeah. I don't know. I wish for that. Yeah, I wish for that. That would be cool. Number 10, the 10th thing that can be irritating for me as a witch, and that I know can be irritating for others: feeling like you're not a good enough witch, feeling like other people are witching better, feeling like there is some extra step that you're supposed to take that you are missing, that means that you don't feel that real fizzy magic, and other people presumably all over the place are feeling it, and there's a room that you somehow can't get into. And it's a story that we tell ourselves. It's just a story that we tell ourselves, but it can be a very powerful one, you know, to tell ourselves that we are not enough, that we don't have the stuff that we need, that we don't have the power that is inherent in other witches. I think this can be linked to just a bigger source of overall irritation around anything that is a point of insecurity for you as a witch, or a point of resistance for you as a witch. And some of it is based on comparison, and some of it is just based on this idea that, you know, you are somehow invested from the get-go with what you need to be a witch. So born witches, for example, natural witches. And if you feel like you didn't take it, if you feel like you didn't take to it like a duck to water, then it means that you're not good enough. It means that you weren't meant to be a witch. It means that you haven't got the stuff, you haven't got the material, you haven't got the fucking minerals to be a witch. And telling yourself that story, I mean, it's just a carousel that we've got to get off. It's a BS carousel that we have to just jump off of. And I think people are sometimes convinced that if they do a ritual, they've got to feel it in every atom of their body, and it's got to be riveting, and it's got to be like something from the movies, and there's got to be special effects, and it's got to feel, like this. Or if you do a devotional to a deity, or if you open up your heart to a deity, there's got to be a really strong sign, and the deity's got to appear in front of you, and it's got to be absolutely majestic. It's got to be full on Hollywood. Otherwise, it hasn't worked. It wasn't worth doing. You're not a real witch. Other people are having these experiences, and you're not having them because you're not good enough. And I think that's something that a lot of us have had to work on. And I think it's something that some of us are going through now. So that, I think, would be a great conversation to have in the comments too. Who is currently dealing with resistance, with insecurity, with not feeling good enough? And if you know that you have overcome a lot of that and you are in a much better place, don't be afraid to go in the comments and give advice to each other. Give loving advice to each other as fellow witches, and let's get a bit of a witchy temple going on right here, right now, down in the comments section below. And until next time, so much love, darlings, and so many high witchy vibes. Blessed be. Mwah.